What's up? Hope everyone's having a good day and is ready for another video in the series we like to call Underrated Throwers. Today we got Piotr Małachowski. He's from Poland. He has thrown 71.84, I'm pretty sure. I think that's his PR, which was the fourth furthest throw, or tied for the fourth longest throw before, Che and Stahl came along, and Alekna. But, it is what it is. He's a two-time silver medalist at the Olympics, a world champion, a multiple-time world championship medalist, and, I've been saying I'm going to be doing a video about him for a while, and now is the day that I'm actually going to do it. Why, you may ask, is because I couldn't think of anyone else, to be quite honest. Because I do think he's slightly underrated, but compared to a lot of the people on my list that I have, he's probably one of the bigger names besides, like Gerd Kanter or something. Or Lars Riedel. But I think Piotr Małachowski just kind of flew a little bit under the radar because he kind of got overshadowed by Robert Harding and Kanter and Virgilijus Alekna. And then, Stahl came along, and by that time he was a little old. And then, Christoph Harding beat him. So, yeah, it's tough, but, whatever. What are you going to do? So, before we start, just like all these videos in these series, I will link his personal best, height, weight, if I can find them, and notable accomplishments in the video description. But, yeah, let's get started. So, this is a training throw. And I really just love it because, it's just... I just love reviewing training throws more. One, because people tend to throw further in practice on average. Because, they don't have the added pressure of, pressure and expectation. It's just... They're just relaxed and just throwing. So, you tend to see a lot more people throw further in practice or in warm-up simply just because they're more relaxed. I don't know how far this throw went. It looked far, but, it probably was like 68-plus meters. I mean, he, in his prime, probably averaged like 67 to 68 meters. And it sucks is just because, whenever he got, second place, he just got perennial just second places all the time. Because, either Robert Harding or someone else would just come along and just barely beat him. And it must be so frustrating that he never got an Olympic medal. And he got 2 silvers, and he was always so close to get gold, but he never did. But, hey, he got World Championship golds in, I think that was 2015. Yeah. Oh, my God, that was 2015. Which... he only threw, he only threw 67 meters. To me, it was one of the weakest ones, but hey, he got it done. He just wasn't facing very much competition, because Gerd Kanter was 40. Robert Harding was barely able to walk. I don't know what the hell happened to Christoph Harding. Dakers kind of wasn't very good. I don't know, there just wasn't a lot of comp. It was one of the more boring finals, at least in my opinion. But, I can't lie, his consistency in major championships is something to look at, he consistently performed over 65-plus meters in over, a decade, and to me, that's pretty good. And consistently, hit, 68-plus a lot of the time. Even in 2009, I know that's famous for Robert Harding winning, but people forget, Piotr Małachowski threw a national record at that meet and threw 69, 03. He PR'd at that meet. At the time, he later broke that PR, obviously. But at the time, it was a PR. And if you PR and throw 69 meters in a world championship or Olympic, to me, that's already special. All right. And he also he had, his series was good too. He threw a 68 in there, a 67. He was consistent too. But he just didn't win. He got edged out barely by Robert Harding. But now let's go down to the analysis. So let me just play this a couple times, just regular motion. So as you can see, he has a very unique orbit, and I tend to call this the Polish orbit, simply just because, you know, a lot of Polish people, discus throwers that I see have this exact orbit, and I don't know if that's just because it's the way they're coached, or it's like there's something about like the body of a Polish dude that they just move like this. I tend to believe that it's just the way they're coached, right? Because, you know, I can't think of a Polish person that didn't throw like this in terms of in terms of their orbit. And what I mean by that is that he keeps it pretty low. Like he doesn't really get like a super big high point, you know, like normally you would. But what it does is it gets him a whole lot of out on the discus. But we'll get to that. So he winds pretty standard, a little bit more over this right leg than I would personally like, but it doesn't really matter. Like he still has weight over his left, so it's fine. Winds back pretty nice here. Turns, gets pretty over his left. I would personally like a little bit more, and I think he gets off the right foot a little bit sooner. But, I mean, you know, that's like a nitpick thing. Like, this position right here is pretty good. I love how far he keeps the discus behind him. This sweep, I personally would coach a little lower because, you know, I just think it's a little easier and a little more predictable. But, you know, this isn't bad. Like, a whole lot of discus throwers do this where they bend the knee, go up. Actually, a lot of Dylan Romani is the first person that comes to mind when I think of someone that does this type of sweep where like the foot goes above the knee and then extends. But I mean, you know, it's just, again, it's a stylistic thing. I have coached like one or two people to do this, and I have seen success. It personally never worked for me, but you know, just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it won't work for you, and it obviously works for him, and you know, he's better than me. So, whatever. But what this does is basically makes you a lot more linear. So he doesn't get like a super wide sweep, but what it does do is because he gets his right foot off the ground a little sooner than I would normally like. This is what creates the whip. All right, instead of it being super long and around and low, he gets this whip by bending this knee and then extending it. So it's not really like, I guess, any kind of kicks. It's kind of like a soccer kick. So he gets here. Now, one thing I don't really like, and I haven't studied this aspect of his throw that much, but now that I think about it, he might tend to do this a lot, is I don't like how he doesn't stop this left foot really. He stops it, but I would personally like him to stop it like there. But he's just on his left foot just a little bit too long. And because of that, he has to get a little more air time. Again, this is a training throw, so it's not like the most technically perfect throw in the world. But, you know, this is just a video that I found that had a really good angle of him throwing. So it was just easier to analyze. So I'm sure obviously, like, this isn't a... I shouldn't say that. This might be a 70-meter throw. I wish there was a distance. It looked really far. So I'm assuming that it was 68 meters plus, especially because this is him in his prime. So, you know, that's about like his average. And it looks like he's kind of trying here too as well. So this doesn't look like a very easy throw. This looks like a comp style throw. But that's just my opinion. Now, this is where he gets into freaky stuff. So this is stuff that, you know, it's standard stuff, you know. So he gets here. Here is where the kind of magic starts in a way. So on here, he's off the ground. And you see with this left arm right here. So it's long here. By the way, before I forget, I really like the way he uses it to help himself get turned around. And then he kind of does like a little bicep curl with his left arm. And to my recollection, I'm pretty sure he's like 6'7", so he's pretty tall. Even though he never looks really tall, because I've always thought he was really short until I actually looked up his height, and I didn't realize like him and Robert Harding were kind of the same height basically. Because like he doesn't really look very tall because he's just really wide. He kind of looks like a shot putter, to be quite real. Like I thought he was like 6'2", which is tall, but like for a discus thrower at this level, that's not very tall. But yeah. So with that in mind, that made this left arm motion a lot more, not palatable, but it made a lot more sense to me, because you tend to see a lot more like taller people tend to bring this arm in. And what I mean by taller is like 6'6" plus people. So like a Lars Reed, Overgillies, Lekna, obviously Piotr Małachowski, a whole lot of throwers have done this, where they kind of bring their left arm in. Now, they do it in different ways, but I think the reason they do it is so they don't travel too far across the ring. It kind of pulls them back into the center a little bit, right here. So as he does this, his right foot or his sweep leg goes inward, and I think what that does is it helps him from traveling too far across the ring. Now that could be just totally wrong, because I'm not 6'7", so I don't know, but but that's just, or it's just a natural movement that he just does, and because he threw far, his coaches or anything just didn't even bother correcting it, because it didn't get in the way of him throwing, so that could also be it. But I tend to see this just a lot with like 6'7" plus people. It is very weird, because like it's a very common thing that you see. Now they do it different ways, but he's very unique in the fact that he does kind of like a bicep curl and kind of goes like up with his arm instead of just continuing going around and just shortening his arm. You tend to see this a lot more in like shot putters, a lot more than discus throwers, but with taller discus throwers, I tend to see it. And my hypothesis is they do that to not get too far across the ring and spend too much time in the air. I think they do it so that they can get their sweep leg down faster. Now, that could be totally wrong. That's just my hypothesis about that. But now we got that out of the way, let's get to the actual touchdown. So touchdown, really nice. I love the little pre-turn. I wish he did it a little bit more, but it's not bad. And as you can see here, his arm never gets above his discus never gets above his head. And that's what I mean by the Polish orbit, is that it's always just super, I guess, yeah, it's pretty flat. But he can get away with it because of the way he uses his hips, and the fact that it works is because, it gets a lot more out. So I think this type of style really is good for really strong winds, because with the lower release angle, he can catch the wind sooner and the wind will carry it further. So if you have super high winds, you don't want to throw it super high, or also just the wind will make it just go super high in the air and just not go anywhere. Where if you have the lower release angle, like I think, I did, okay. And obviously this is high. All right, I will say that. It is high. But when you're throwing these distances, you tend to see the further people throw, the higher their releases are, simply just because the disc is just in the air more. So like if you throw like 150 feet in discus, it's just the wind's not going to affect it as much, because it just doesn't stay in the air as long, because it doesn't have the energy to do that. Whereas if you're throwing 70 plus meters or 68 plus meters, you tend to see a lot more of those guys have super high release points. All right, it's just simply because when you throw a discus or any implement, it's like this. It has an up, a little plateau, and then goes down. All right? So like a 150-foot discus thrower would be like that. Whereas like a 60-meter discus thrower would be like that. All right? Something like that. All right, so when I say it's low, it's relative to people that throw as far as he does. All right? That's a pretty low release point. All right? And a pretty low orbit. Like, compare this to, like, Gerd Kanter's, who's, like, even though he has, like, one of the highest high points, it's like this. And honestly, he kind of has, like, not really a Robert Harding, but Robert Harding's kind of shallow as well. Honestly, this kind of reminds me of, like, a Lars Riedel type of orbit, where it doesn't get super high, and they just rely on so much out. The only difference is he's reversing instead of non-reversing. But I think he could throw really far non-reversing, because you tend to see non-reversers have kind of lower orbits. One, because they don't rely on the height of the release point. They rely on the out more. And also, they rely a lot more on wind conditions on average. So, because, they're not getting the added benefits of a reverse. So, when you get to a windy meet, a lot of non-reversers tend to throw super far because, because of the lower release point. The discus can catch the wind better. All right. So that's a little lesson in the wind and how you can throw further in the wind. Just release a little lower. I'm not saying just straight laser the discus because it still has to catch the wind. All right. So, whatever. But yeah, this is just a lesson. Just make sure you don't have a super high point. Unless you're someone like Gerd Kanter, who's just a freak of nature. You don't really usually want a discus here, like up here, usually, because that can lead to scooping a discus, palming a discus, just throwing straight up and not getting enough out. I tend to really like this type of style for like the normal thrower that doesn't throw in like a stadium or something. So like the level I coach, they don't really go to many like close stadiums like in like the Diamond League and stuff, or Europeans, or Worlds and Olympics. They tend to throw with some wind. So, and right now I'm actually coaching someone who has some shoulder problems and can't actually. It's hard for him to raise his shoulder or his hands above his head. So this type of style really suits someone like that. Someone who's pretty immobile. Now, you do need mobility to throw discus, but if someone has trouble raising their hands above their head and stuff, even if it doesn't hurt, if it's just like not a very comfortable thing for them to do, or if they have like a pre-existing injury or something, like this could be a really good style because you can have a low orbit, and if you throw with this type of style, you can still throw far, obviously, because he's throwing 71 meters and like 68, 69 meters like a bunch of times. So like that's pretty good. That's high, I guess. No, okay, yeah, that's pretty freaking good. But yeah. So I'm having my guy right now that I'm coaching, my athlete, do this type of style of throw simply just because of that shoulder restriction that he has. So, and it's really suiting him. He's throwing way further with it. So, because it's just more comfortable for him, so he can just get into easier positions without having to force positions in the ring. So, if you have an athlete like that, or you're an athlete like that, might consider trying this style of orbit. It might help you a little bit. All right. Now, if you do notice, he does have an orbit. So he has a low point right here. And he does have a high point right here. It's just not as exaggerated. All right, so he does have a low and high point. It's just not very, not very low and not very high. All right, but I really love this position. All right, the discus is far behind him. I would personally like to have his right foot keep turning so he can land. So the discus didn't catch up to him that much, and he landed a little bit more like this. But, it's not terrible. This is like a stylistic thing too that a lot of throwers do, is that they stop turning their right foot until the left comes down, and that makes them a little more patient with their finish. You just got to make sure that you keep your shoulders back, because you know, a lot of throwers just have the tendency to just rush the finish, especially that's a really big thing in discus because it's a long pathway. So if you get a shot putter that throws discus as well, you tend to see them really rush the finish in discus because they're so used to the timing and shot put. So a cue like this to stop turning the right foot for that split second can really help them find that patience. But, you know, he gets here, turns. I love this position. This is this position where he's out like this and kind of, if this would stop moving, okay, yeah, okay, when he's like a little bit tilted here, the block is really, really nice. He's off the ground with his right, transferring forward, and you see this little slight lean that he gets here. All right, that's very, very nice. All right, that's usually what discus throwers like to do. A little bit, it's just a natural thing that tends to happen, but some throwers like really try and do that, and it's because, you know, they're trying to extend their radius at the end of the throw. You tend to see a lot more non-reversers do this. Daniel Stahl as well does this, and it's probably a lot more noticeable when he does it. I tend to think he does it a little too much, especially nowadays. But back when he was like throwing super, super far, you know, it was a great thing for him to do. Gerd Kanter did this a lot as well. You know, just a whole bunch of throwers do this a bunch. Robert Harding as well did this a whole bunch. Same with like Lars Riedel did this a whole lot. So it's just a very common thing because, you know, like with discus, you want the further away it is from you, the more radius and it can get, the further you'll throw. All right, I'm not going to get into the physics of this because I don't want it to be a 30-minute video. But, you know, if you want me to explain the physics of why you want more radius on your discus throw, it's kind of like the same concept as hammer. The hammer throw as well. So, you know, it's the same concept. But, yeah, so if you want me to create a video like that, I can, but this is not the video for that. I'm going to try not to get into a physics tangent. I already went on a wind tangent, so I don't want this to be a 40-minute video. But I really like this. Now, some things I don't really like is that, one, he stops the right foot. I tend not to like that much because if you get an inexperienced thrower, you know, they just tend to stop or just never turn it once the left foot comes down. So it'll just stay there and they'll just reverse and jump up in the air. So it's a very hard thing to do. But if you have an athlete or you are an athlete that tends to rush the finish at the discus, this may be a good cue because, you know, he gets here and then he turns his right foot. I would personally like him to stay a little bit more grounded. But the thing is, with this type of style of throwing, he's super momentum based. All right, so like here, this to me is like the Tom Walsh style of throwing discus, where it's just like, just move the discus as fast as possible and never let it stop. So, you know, it's like he doesn't really hold the chest that much. You know, he kind of over rotates a little bit here, and like the discus just never stops. There's never a point where it stops. There's never a point where it's not accelerating. And it's the same kind of concept that like makes Tom Walsh really good. So, you know, when you're like this big, all right, like he's not a slender guy. I think he was like 6'7", like 280. That's pretty big. Like usually like discus throwers tend to be a little more slender and be more in like the 250 range down. Not a lot of discus throwers are like 280 plus. It's like him, Daniel Stahl. Virgilius Alekna, I think, was like 280. He just didn't look like it because he was like 6'9". But, you know, like he didn't have like a belly and stuff. I think Kanter, Kanter was probably around like, I think he was around like 260 maybe. But yeah, like you don't tend to see discus throwers with like bellies and stuff. I'm not calling them fat or anything. It's just like, this is more like the typical build for like a shot putter. because normally like discus throwers don't need a lot of mass. But however, if you do this type of style that's a lot more momentum based in throwing and doesn't rely on a whole lot of separation and just relies on just going fast. I mean, because like he goes super fast out the gate. Like he just turns and goes. All right. So with this, you tend to want to be a little bit more mass based in terms of like just being bigger. You know, same thing. Daniel Stahl kind of throws the same kind of principles as well. And yeah, I mean, it works. I mean, if you can handle it and you can be consistent like that, it's a lot easier to do in terms of technique because, you know, you just don't have to think about as much. But it's also hard to control, and you have to, because, you know, it's very easy to just rush the throw if you do this type of style and go way too fast. All right, so you tend to see this. You tend to see like high school throwers do this a lot, but they're doing it wrong, which kind of sucks. But, you know, I think it's just because, you know, they're high schoolers and they're inexperienced. But, you know, when you get like a true momentum-based thrower, you know, they're usually like 280 plus pounds and just go super quick out of the gate and try and maintain that speed. All right. Now, he does accelerate a little bit, obviously. So he gets here, you know, like he does accelerate, but for the most part, you can't really tell. Oh, sorry. Something's in my throat. Don't take that out of context, by the way. But, yeah. Other than that, really nice. I really like his throw. Yeah, there's a few like nitpick and like technical things that I personally wouldn't coach him to do, or actually I probably would because it works for him. And that's probably a big thing, is that just because I don't agree with this style doesn't mean, like, if I was his coach, I'd be a fool not to let him try and throw like this, because obviously it works. All right, and I'm assuming, considering that he's probably been throwing since he was a little kid, you know, he's tried multiple ways of throwing, and this is the style that works for him. And, you know, it served him well throughout his career. So, yeah, overall, super good. He also competed a really long time, actually. I think he also had like a 20-year career, or close to that. So, you know, it was great because he was pretty much not really riddled with injuries like a Robert Harding, whose prime got cut really short. But, yeah, he had a very lucky career, too, that normally like, people with that long of careers get hurt a lot. And to my recollection, it was pretty healthy, actually, a lot of the time. He had kind of a natural decline, which was pretty good. Like, I think even, like, his last year, he was still throwing, like, 65 meters, which is pretty good. So, you know, this technique works over a long period of time. It's super consistent. You know, it just works. So, yeah, hope you guys liked it. This video, again, I'll try and link his personal best, height, weight, if I can find them, and notable accomplishments in the video description. And other than that, thanks for watching, and see y'all later.